your support base. But I think the truth is, as one of the lawyers told you, let it go. It's time we move on. Every entity of the state, counties, national government, parastatals, everybody gets audited. We must audit this process. And it is by auditing that then we can know what we are fixing. What is the problem that we are fixing with IEBC? So why audit? First of all, there are different numbers from the IEBC server, from the portal.
We can open up on the issue of auditing the process. And that is a mandate that is given to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission.
There were some jumpy, fishy operations going on in some of these constituencies. So we looked at another one, and we saw here Raila has 277 votes and 102. But then in the Bomas, now he has 77, and William Ruto has 304 votes.
There was all this information during the Supreme Court hearings, because the funny bit is the stories that you are now canvassing before the committee were equally brought to the attention of the Supreme Court.
We seek to strengthen individual parties as key pillars for strong coalitions in Kenya. Secondly, that multipartyism is a critical tool to the growth of democracy in Kenya.
Azimio la Umoja wa Kenya, what would you say to the role of Parliament with regard to strengthening multi-party democracy, and particularly coalition arrangements?
The Office of the Registrar is holding brief for the current regime to the extent that she has mutilated her functions as decreed by the Political Parties Act. It is therefore a recommendation that the Office of the Registrar ought to be made independent, and that it ought to be insulated from the interferences that has come from the current regime.
And therefore our position is that let us strengthen political parties. But the big question is, how do you strengthen your political party? You strengthen by recruiting members. So if in an instance you can recruit members from a particular political party to a point whereby that political party is no longer viable, you can decide to take up the entire membership of a political party and bring to your, so strengthen.
If you think that the 2022 general elections were not fair enough, the provisions of the Constitution are very clear that you have an opportunity at the Supreme Court to go and challenge the decision of IBC.
Why isn't the cost of living coming down? And we have demonstrated that it is because the regime is mismanaging public finances. We have demonstrated is that because the regime is maintaining a very high deficit.
I think that kind of request, it will create more chaos than accountability. Because what they are telling us is that they are ready for responsibility, but they are not ready for accountability. And we say that responsibility minus accountability is equal to corruption. No grace period for impunity.
It therefore requires that we focus, and we have focused our attention on high-impact cases and on high-impact individuals. When BBI was happening, several communities, actually similar, the same communities that are here today before.
Honorable Marwa, I asked specific question.
Yes.
You are members of parliament.
I am coming to that.
Just go straight to that. Whatever BBI, just go straight to that at the same time.
Yes, we have a bill, proposed bill, that is yet to be tabled in Parliament.
The people of Haiti, our dear friends, today stand in need. It is our fundamental moral obligation to be their friend indeed by standing with them.
I thank President Ruto of I thank him for his willingness to serve as the lead nation of a UN-backed security support mission. I call on the Security Council to authorize this mission now. The people of Haiti cannot wait much longer.
The result of the voting is as follows: 13 votes in favor, 2 abstentions, no votes against.
We have stepped up to create a new way of preserving global peace and security, answering the repeated calls of a member state facing a multidimensional crisis amid alarming, spiraling gang violence.
Our nation possesses excellent international peace-mediating, peacemaking, peace-building, and peacekeeping credentials. From East Timor and the former Yugoslavia to Eritrea and Angola, all the way to Sierra Leone, we have always stood ready and willing to do our part to bring peace, security, and stability. This is why we cannot turn away from Haiti. We therefore stand in solidarity with the Caribbean Communities Reparation Commission in their pursuit for accountability for the evil and cruel actions against African populations, including enslaved persons, together with their children. And we are confident that today we stand at the threshold of a sequence of reparative measures, including debt cancellation to free Haiti from shackles of an ugly past that bind them even today.
Right, that is a soapbox, of course, with the president also speaking about the Haiti, just to give you a glimpse of the political tone and telling the country. And we had as well the deliberations at the NDC, that is the National Dialogue Committee, what we've been discussing regarding also IBC, and the opening of the service that now remains to be a very contentious cabinet issue. But also looking at the editorial cartoons today, just to chime in as well, we can see now the president is really coming down hard on foreign travels, especially from civil servants. And this is how the scale will be. Foreign travel, you need now to actually put your weight there so that we can see if it really passes muster. Moving forward, there has been an indication from the government to try and tame down on foreign travels. Every person is traveling every which way. We have been told of a battery of retinue of officers accompanying CSs to some of these foreign trips, and even the delegates wonder, or maybe the hosting countries, they wonder why we have such a huge number of delegates visiting this country. But this is costing the country heavily when it comes to per diems, and we've seen also the civil servants have been before the National Dialogue Committee, and they're declaring their pecuniary shame looking at the pay slips. And they've been depending heavily sometimes on these per diems and some of the equipment that really comes with the travels as well. But let me hear from our panelists, especially looking at what the president has done briefly before we buckle down to Sudan and these other issues. What the president has done, especially on the 10% budgetary cut from every ministry in austerity measures. Do you think this is really coming late in the day? Because we've had the president coming during just at the cusp of his taking maybe reins of the country, saying we'll cut back 300 billion shillings from the budget. But we've seen, looking at the budgetary allocations, that this current administration, actually, that allocation has gone up. Yusuf Hassan, let's begin with you.
Well, I think I welcome the president's decision because the Kenyan leadership, the Kenyan civil service, the Kenyan politicians do not recognize that, in fact, we are a poor country with a very low GDP. And therefore, we simply cannot afford the kind of living that we have seen in the previous administrations. And I can say that it's never too late because we've just been discussing the cost of living. And the cost of living sometimes is caused by the high level of taxation and so on. And if you are not going to use those resources prudently, then it is just going to be a completely waste of time. One of the biggest expenditures I see, and I have been seeing since I've been in Parliament, is foreign travel. Mm-hmm. There is too much foreign travel by the Kenyan state officials, mm-hmm. From the executive down to parliamentarians all the way to the judiciary and the civil servants. And the other thing is the level of corruption and nepotism that also mm-hmm. determines the number of delegations that go. I have seen delegations of 30 to 40 people. and you do not know the role of those particular people, other than the greed that we have that has been mentioned here, of earning a DSA. Because every state official, when they travel foreign, gets a DSA.
What's a DSA?
The daily subsistence allowance, per diem. Per diem. You get anything from $400 to $1,000 a day for every day you are outside the country, in addition to the tickets. And if you look at traveling now, I mean, we were just looking at my own family's Christmas travel plans. The cost of airfare has quadrupled. You know, it's just not possible. And I think a lot of people are going to look at maybe local tourism, going to the beautiful parts of our country rather than traveling out, because it's becoming impossible.
Impossible now.
So I think we should cut that down. We should also cut down on the number of delegates. The government should also cut its expenditure. There's a lot of wastage, there's a lot of leakages. And for the president and the government of the day to justify the heavy taxes that are now imposed on ordinary people, surely the government must also show a good example that this public, the collected money is put into good use, and it creates it generates useful value for the Kenyan public, because it is not acceptable. Most of the people who pay tax say that it's not acceptable to be paying these high taxes, and end up those taxes being eaten through corruption, wastage and leakages. And I think it's a high time that the government crack down on that. And we're going to watch and see whether this is just a rhetoric or a serious effort on the part of government to change the culture and the behavior of the bureaucracy, of the system, and would put into place a prudent use of our resources, our hard-earned resources.
Right, so we will see if they'll make good of their promises as well, but also protocol. And we had this previously, the previous regime, we had the head of a public service, Joseph Kinyua, saying that no traveling shall also be taking place unless there is approval coming from the department as well. It seems from that regime to this regime, we still have the same.
But there's just one point. For example, some of this foreign travel is absolutely not necessary. For example, with today's technology, you can engage with people elsewhere in the world. I attend many conferences now from the comfort of my home through virtual in New York, in London, in any part of the world. And one time, our neighbor, the president of a neighboring country, Tanzania, had imposed a total ban on travel. He said there is no need for a minister to go to this conference. We have an ambassador. We should be represented by our ambassador. We should be represented by the people on the ground. Give them instructions, tell them what they need to do. And that's what he did for the whole period that he was in office. And the country saves millions of dollars. We can do the same. Technology is such an advanced stage that in fact there are very few meetings that you need to attend. And even when you attend, I remember when I was at on the other side of the fence, when I was with the United Nations, you know, the Kenyan delegation, the procedures are very clear. There is a conference where you only require 2 or 3 people, and 10 people come. They go to these meetings. These meetings are arranged in advance. Even the seating is arranged. These people cannot get into that conference because it's 2 plus 2 or 1 plus 1. And it is very, very clear. And then someone comes with a bodyguard, he comes with a driver, comes with a personal assistant. Surely we are a poor country. We cannot afford that. We should live with our own means. We should live within our own means and preserve our resources for development.
Right. Living our own financial truth is not what we are doing. Is it really coming late into the day right now that we are experiencing, even paying our own debts, that we can see we are almost on the cusp of defaulting according to the reports that we're getting? So this 10% from ministries, what a sustainable difference will it make?
Dibal, I think I do agree wholeheartedly with Mheshimiwa and what he has communicated. First of all, I think there should be a government circular, if there isn't already, in limiting the number of people who can actually be allowed to travel for certain function and whatever position it is. Because the extent that someone can carry a delegation of 40 people or 30 with them, and just going there, one of the scene we've seen is they go to those meetings and they're sleeping, or they come in late, they take even no notes, and there's really nothing that happens. This reminds me of Ali Mazrui in 1986 PBS series, The Africans at Triple Heritage. He admonishes Africans of having borrowed the appetite of largesse and luxury of the colonial master without borrowing the ethics and the discipline that goes into production of those appetites. And so we consume, but we don't even understand how actually those people arrive at that. And you're going to be surprised, and many of people of the panelists have been, worked and lived and studied abroad, is advanced economies, they tend to have very lean delegations, and only people who are fit for purpose are actually going to participate in certain things. Even the recently concluded conferences, the people who were sent, who are actually the key persons who are supposed to be doing that from foreign missions and from foreign countries. They were not coming with delegations, and an ambassador will come alone unless he or she does not understand the language, and that's when they're going to have a translator. They will actually ask if there's translation there, and if they can bring a translator for them or an interpreter for them. Understand? But with us, we really, really have bad manners. And so, cutting 10%, it is something good. Moving along the lines of reducing travel is good. But if we do not seal the loopholes, if we don't have rules that limit certain engagement, and you mentioned state officials, but this thing goes all the way to county levels. MCAs every month they're going out abroad for benchmarking. Benchmarking what? You're going to Israel for benchmarking, you're coming from, I don't know which village, which does not need Israeli benchmarking, may need perhaps for you to cross to another county to actually see what they have done, instead of going to something you can't even relate to, you see. And so there has to be a circular actually limiting how these things are done, because the wastage from the county level all across is so huge that even the savings we're trying to do, even as we try to increase revenue by increasing taxes, it may not ultimately benefit or produce the kind of results we're going to see. And Kenyans may continue actually being at pain. So if we're serious about this, we need to have systems that are going to limit this kind of hemorrhage, but also punish those people who are going to violate it. As long as there is no sanction and there is always an incentive, it is going to continue happening.
I like what Dr. Nanje is saying here, but I will hasten to add that within government circles, we have no shortage of circulars that give guidance on how things need to be done, especially on this issue of travel. I have had the privilege of having worked at different levels of government before, including running a press center for a few years. The question we need to ask is, why are Kenyans traveling? What I find interesting, and Mheshimiwa hinted at it, is many of those who are traveling, they are not necessarily traveling to get ideas, to benchmark or do a few things. They are traveling as a way of, supplementing the income that they make out of the allowances that they get. That's the sole purpose when you look at it generally. We are not saying everybody who travels does that, but generally, you find that is the case. Over the years, Mheshimiwa, we have had circulars from the office of the president. Even at some point, one had to be cleared by the office of the president before you travel. But every time we make one step forward, we make 2 steps backwards. That's a paradox. That's a contradiction that we have as a country. I like what the the president said. But the question is, how well is it going to work? Because we have had this before. We are going to do this, we are going to take stand measures, nobody's going to travel. But then after a couple of months down the line, then we'll revert back. What we need, Dibal, is not such a knee-jerk reactions. What we need is not a reactionary approach to this problem. What we need is simply a long-term approach that will begin to reorient the Kenyan public service, the civil servants, the public officers, to think first of their country before their interests. Because for me, that is the challenge. We think about ourselves, and then the entity we call Kenya comes second.
Indeed, and we want just to follow up a bit. Let me just hear from you before I come to you. So,
okay. Not too long ago, PS Minister of Finance was advising Kenyans that, particularly the civil service, that even having, because I think they have exhausted the issue of foreign travel, but how about local travel? Going to stay in hotels, seminars, members of parliament just go to Naivasha to
begin from there.
Yes. The spending, I mean, look, the PS was advising, if you have to fly to Mombasa, if you have to go to Mombasa, must you fly? There is SGR. I have been on SGR. We remember we reported here the other day. We even had a meeting on the SGR conference because we managed to get on the train, seated well, and we were able to be discussing as we are going. And you pay 3,000. How much are you paying for the flight? But you know what I want to go behind all this is, what is the spirit informing this move? I think Daktari here, Professor, has said, let's not go on a knee-jerk that, people have complained there are so many foreign travels, let's now put an on. Let's go to the spirit of saying, do we want to reduce wastage in the government? Where are these leakages? The leakages are many. First of all, you have a plotted civil service, including county government, and you still want to increase the number of those positions. Let's cut on those so that you have a lean civil service and look at the kind of, say, allowances you are paying so that you will have a service that is well remunerated but not plotted. I think when you look at the spirit of even our employment is to have numbers and not necessarily effectiveness. So let's start from there. Then you go on to the expenditures where there are leakages, whether it is procurement, all this having. Let me give an example. A friend of mine was telling me he was running a huge government organization, and one time he walks into the conference room, he had guests who had come for a meeting, and he finds the table laid with more or less a banquet. And he saw that, then he thought, well, these visitors could have been special. He didn't talk about it. The following day, he had another guest. He was new in the department. He saw it. Then he called his assistant. He says, what is happening? What is this that I see in the conference? All these goodies that I brought for entertainment. The person went and said, sir, please don't stop this. This is how we survive. Because if we don't have this tea coming here and there, bread that we have during the time visitors come here, in fact, we'll have visitors to come so that we can bring this to entertain them. This is what he's saying, that people are not traveling because they want to go and represent the country, to sell Kenya's agenda, to advance Kenya's interest. It is because they want to add something to their pocket. So the spirit of all this is, do we really want to run an efficient government? Do we want to save costs? There are many loopholes, including all this local travel, having seminars in hotels. There is huge leakages. Yet, if you look at the taxes you are paying, you'll be paying tax when you buy things in the shop. You pay tax when you buy your fare. You pay tax from your pay slip. And all this is wasted, is not being invested you are servicing debt. So let's be effective all round and not pick and choose, so that it is effective administration, effective expenditure.
Right. I wanted just to ask also the issue. Maybe we have all these pronouncements coming from government, cut back 10% from the parastatals and ministries, use Passat or instead of fuel guzzlers that we have on the road. But even maybe on the cutting back of the president's salaries, you remember that, yes, we want 20% from every government officials, but where is a requisite sort of legislation or framework or policy that this is predicated on, so that even when we have a previous administration exiting and we have a new one, they pick up on this policy that it is documented. This is a policy that every government official will not be using fuel guzzlers. This is a policy document that when we have travel and we have missions and we have all these foreign delegations out of the country, this will be the requisite number. Exceeding this, there has to be an explanation or there has to be an approval from the, of course, presiding officer or presiding boss in that particular administration. So it seems that, yes, we have all these good intentions, but there is nothing legally, so to speak, backing these intentions. We'll have this pronouncement, then we'll find in December, everyone will just be expending or, spending the way they really want without any budgetary consideration at the end of the day. So that is the question we're asking. What happened to Passat? Was there any policy that when we had Uhuru as a finance minister declaring, was it just a broadside declaration without any documentary evidence to it?
No, not about it. The system is the most regulated system. We're a modern state. Our bureaucracy works through laws, legislations, regulations, and directives that are written. Every government department, every state department has very clear instructions of how the procedures, daily procedures of payment, expenditure is determined. But we have a culture of impunity. We have a culture of corruption. And this overrides many of these good intentions. So we need a wholesale change of culture and mindset beyond the president. We have to show that in our political behavior, in our political parties. We have to show that in our daily lives. This is something you inculcate in society all round. It just doesn't come. Overall, Kenyans do not see many of these failures and problems as a cultural and inbred cultural problem. When you travel outside and you drive a vehicle, you would see how people follow the rules of the road. I have lived outside and I have developed a particular habit. When you get into the car, you immediately put on your belt. You look, you use the signal to move left, right, and center, and then you come back to Nairobi. And what do you see? A jungle where nobody gives a damn. But those rules are there. You know, if you are taught those rules before you can get a driving license. But this is the state we're in. Therefore, I think it will require much more than a directive. It will require a change in our mindset of people to follow the rules and do the right thing, because it is in the, for example, the instructions that you cannot buy a car that is higher than the specification for that ministry, and it was enforced at one time. But now you see a lot of Land Cruisers owned by state. The question is, who made those decisions? Obviously, the head of that department, a principal secretary or a cabinet minister, made that decision. Then it is the responsibility of the head of state to put them into line and say, that's not acceptable, you're breaking the rules. But I agree with the ambassador that, in fact, we should look beyond foreign travel. Foreign travel is just a drop in the ocean. We should look at the expenditure, the unnecessary expenditure.
Locally.
For example, the president himself should cut down his entourage. He has a very big fleet, convoy, every time he goes in and out. He should think about reducing it. The cabinet secretaries have a convoy. The county governors have a convoy.
Correct.
The speakers of various assemblies, we now have 47 governments. They all have convoys because when they're traveling on the highway or on the road, to small businesses, to small activities.
But what is the rhyme and reason for these convoys that we do have? With flags, we have, like 6 of them, carrying one cabinet secretary, 3 of them ahead, 3 of them behind.
But that's the mindset I'm talking about. That's the culture, that because of their position,
maybe
they're entitled to...
They're entitled.
Like there was a deputy governor who had bought a 1 million shilling seat. And then you see bouquet of flowers in many of these offices. You have the meals have been, that you get constant supply of food. And some of these institutions are run down because a lot of money is getting into unnecessary expenditures, wasted. And the schools, look at our schools. Whenever I travel and sometimes we visit a school in a foreign country, I get very embarrassed because in the old days, our schools were very neat, the lawns were fixed, and you felt you were coming to a well-run institution. The principals and the headmasters in many of these schools have left them to fall apart. And you're wondering whether you're going to a place where there is no order. Our institutions are the same. For example, yesterday we were hosted by the National Intelligence Agency. The setup there is so beautiful. It's when you get in there, you feel proud of being a Kenyan. It's a well-run institution. It is very efficient. If all our institutions were run that way, then we would be a very proud nation, which is the money that has been given to that institution is used effectively. But a lot needs to be done, and we can save a lot of money for development, which is not happening at the moment. But I would like to suggest that we need civic education, sensitization to change our mindset, because everybody is looking for an extra shilling out of the government resources that are not rightfully theirs and should be used for the common good.
Right, before we head to just beyond borders, it's a good issue that we should broach as well, because you are the people who we can say are the think tanks, and you can help us broaden this understanding. When it comes to asset utilization and asset sweating, especially for the legislators, like what we do have with the Bomas of Kenya, and we had the co-chair, Kimani Ichung'wah, saying, even what we are drinking, as we're taking the tea, and these rooms are paid for by the civil society. The question is, how then do we utilize what we do have? What would the sole purpose of a Kenya School of Government if these talks were held there? Will we be saving almost 50 or 100,000 shillings from, that particular...
Bomas is owned by the state.
It's owned by the state, but still you're paying even to Bomas as an institution. What would be happening to Kenya School of Government? Where will we, or even maybe for the legislators, what will happen to, you have a center in Karen that is not being utilized? What is that particular training?
The Center for Parliamentary Studies.
Center for Parliamentary Studies, which is not adequately utilized. You'll find the Center for Parliamentary Studies, when even you're doing your own inductions, you have to go to Naivasha for an induction. You have to have inductions in Mombasa. You have to have even the committee meetings in Mombasa. How often when is the last time you yourself, just so to speak, as legislators, not really pointing you, but just as legislators, have you even darkened the door of...
I have never been to the Center for Parliamentary Studies, but...
You've never been there?
But the question... But that is happening all over. If every government...
That's what I'm asking. I'm not really pointing at the legislators. I'm just saying, how are we utilizing this?
The military is building hospitals. The police is building hospitals. Many civil servants are building their own institutions, which are completely unnecessary. All those institutions can be shared. Let's upgrade the hospitals that we have instead of building a new hospital, because we don't even know where the doctors are coming from. So you're absolutely right about the duplication, but the bureaucracy is a monster. The bureaucracy is a beast. One component of the bureaucracy is not aware of what the other one is doing. For example, even if you were to take this delegation to the Kenya School of Government, the head of the Kenya School of Government would say, I don't have the budget to feed these people. I don't have the budget to host them. So they have to be given a budget. And since they had not budgeted for that eventuality, the government has to cough up the money to run it. So I think the bureaucracy also has its own complexities, which is conceptuous.
All right. Let's hear from Ken before we come to Ambassador. Let's hear from.
Thank you. I like what Mheshimiwa is saying. You see, there is a way in which government departments work in silos, kind of. The left sometimes works like it doesn't know what the right is doing. But what I wanted to say is at times it's probably much more easier, much more cheaper to hold the talks like we're doing in a government institution, such as the Bomas of Kenya, than probably holding it in a hotel somewhere. Because Bomas could be cheaper than many places that you can think of. I remember a few years back when Ambassador Mudaura was the head of the public service and the head of the cabinet. He gave us a circular that government functions have to be held within government institutions. And that time I was running the Kenya Utalii College, where we have a small Utalii hotel. And I remember the boost that we had at the Utalii Hotel, hosting government functions and doing all that. It actually made us to have funds to improve the facility and to take care of a number of things which otherwise ordinarily we could have not been able to do. So I always see that as an advantage than probably going out there and spending in non-government institutions. Holding a meeting in, for example, the University of Nairobi with very nice halls and conference rooms will give the university some extra income to improve those facilities because it doesn't get that money directly from the exchequer.
Right, thank you. Ambassador.
Just a quick comment, because I think this program is about the topic of foreign matters, and we better transit there.
But we have to begin local.
Yeah. Mheshimiwa has brought out some good points, and I really like them. But I want to challenge him in one aspect. To me, I think the buck stops also with the Parliament, because when he even gave us an example, when he mentioned of this case where people go and buy, for instance, cars, whatever, which are beyond specifications, where is the role of Parliament? Because that is the oversight that Parliament should have. I remember one time a Secretary of Health or something in the US went and bought furniture for his office, which was against the procurement procedures. The Congress, put up a query. That secretary had to pay it from his cash. And so you can see Parliament itself has not even led by example. Because the whole idea, Mheshimiwa, it's good to get this feedback. Perhaps in the constituents, people come to ask you, man, about health, education. They don't tell you this. But let's tell you, Mheshimiwa, as Parliament, you are the source of also the problem, because you are not providing your oversight to put government in check, because you indulge in the same things. You have created committees so that you can get your allowances. You have created all these trips to move abroad and all this to go to your constituencies. And so you don't have that guts to go and ask those that you supervise. So let's start with ourselves. And if Parliament itself was to play its role, then we will have accountability. That is my take for it.
Could we hear from?
I want to respond to that, because I think
it's direct to you.
The ambassador is right. But actually, there's a lot of oversight going on in Parliament.
Yes.
We have so many committees that are dealing with excesses in government. We have the Auditor General's report that we look into. 90% of the exposures you get about misuse comes through these parliamentary committees. We have stopped a lot of abuses. We have we've stopped a lot of over expenditure, but it takes quite a long time to get a report from the Auditor General to expose. It takes 2 to 3 years, and by the time you preside over it and make a decision, the officers or even the government of that particular time has gone out of office. So Parliament does a lot of oversight activities that does not come into the public eye. There isn't a day where we're not questioning a government department about a certain behavior, about a certain expenditure, and cautioning them about it.
All right. Dr. Hassan Kanenje, I was just wondering, because we have, especially, let's gravitate to the issue of Haiti right now that we had the President speaking on, and we'll delve deeper into that. I think last week he did a good job at it, so there's nothing much to really talk about. But the question is, this particular move has not been actually discussed on the floor of the House, has it? Because it's when now MPs are asking and they're questioning CS Kindiki and also IG Kome regarding Haiti. How come such a very heavy undertaking has not been also a matter of discussion on the floor of the House? That is what, even for your committee on defense and foreign relations.
Well, foreign affairs is led by the executive. You know, there's a division of labor.
It's good to know.
So the president and the executive have the responsibility to represent us internationally, state to state. And so much of this thing has gone under in those deliberations. It's only when the president makes the decision to deploy does it become an issue for discussion in Parliament, and if necessary, a request for authorization. So we haven't really reached this. This particular subject has been taken out of context. It has also been dramatized and politicized nationally and globally, because this is what happens in every peacekeeping, peace enforcement operation. The state decides what its contribution is. It's asked by another state or by the United Nations. And then there's a process of negotiations that takes place behind the scenes, as the ambassador perhaps would know, because that's what they do most of the time. So because it is an interesting subject, it's because it's a controversial subject, it has got its own momentum. But the resolution to deploy at the United Nations was only made yesterday or the day before yesterday.
That was the resolution of the United Nations.
The nitty-gritty of what this particular operation is not clear. Kenya, the only thing that we know that Kenya is going to lead it, that Kenya is also going to contribute about 1,000 police officers. We've already had a mission that had gone to Haiti that would also obviously report to Parliament to give us a clear picture of what they have seen and what they intend to do. So our role is coming. At the moment, if we were to get involved, it's purely speculation. Until yesterday, there was no resolution authorizing this particular mission. So I think everybody in Kenya now is an authority on Haiti, the negatives and the positives. And everybody is advising the Kenyan government and the Kenyan system, which has got quite considerable experience in peacekeeping and peace enforcement. We've been in many countries in Africa, in Asia, and even in Europe. We've operated in Kosovo.
But that is not being disapproved.
And then also we have been involved in places like Somalia, which are much worse than anything you can compare to in Haiti.
But you remember when we were going to Somalia, we had the government or the parliament actually having a special sitting. This particular issue was broached, and yes.
No, Debal, I was in that committee. I was in that parliament, and I was in that committee. Our forces had gone into Somalia. The president then came back to say, authorize it now, because the president has the power to declare war.
He did.
And only when he defends our borders does he come to ask for the permission of Parliament because of the budget and also the legality of it. So actually we went into Somalia before there was any authorization from Parliament. We updated it, and even we didn't have a UN resolution. We didn't have a UN support. We went into Somalia without any legal support. It was only after we had gone in and our soldiers were then transformed into UN forces did we become did our operation in Somalia become legal. So I think it's a process, and the government would eventually come to Parliament, and Parliament would debate it both in the committee and in the plenary.
Right. Don't you find it a bit, or makes you a bit antsy when, of course, you say it's a preserve of the president to deploy these police officers to Haiti, he makes the call. Then if the president is being given all these powers to do that at the end of the day, when I'm not saying he has interest, but when a president or an executive has interest also in another country and he has the power to deploy forces as he wants, what is the place of the National Assembly and collectively as a voice of Kenya in approving this? Because it comes also with budgetary implications at the end of the day. Right now we know United States will be actually handling the budgetary side of it. 100 billion shillings, $100 billion is what you're being told. So I'm just questioning that particular process itself. Dr. Kanenjo, maybe you can inform us.
Well,
should it be the prerogative of the executive?
Things to do with the parliamentary approvals is a little bit outside the purview of my competence, but Mheshimiwa, he has spoken to it, I think, so eloquently. But the world over, the president has quite a bit of powers when it comes to certain actions that affect the state, especially in terms of declaring war. A lot of times it's only when they require a budget, and even in the United States, the same is true. That's when they actually come to Congress, to ask for more money, for more authorization, to legitimize that action, but also to ensure there is abide by the legislature. My concern, the president's move, of course, is in line with, number one, the way he has a very Pan-Africanist. When I say Pan-Africanist, that just doesn't mean people on the continent, but also sort of African gene pool outside, the continent. I think he's been very, very clear on that. But Kenya has a long history of peacekeeping, and one of probably the most successful countries in terms of peacekeeping. Understandably, Haiti is a very interesting theater, for Kenya. Not the least because, it's the first black republic, got its independence in 1804. It is interesting that it still turns out to be the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and I would say one of the poorest countries actually in the world. It's not a very big country geographically, but it's significant in terms of the challenges it poses. Now, this being a non-UN funded mission, perhaps that may be part of my concern, because the United States has, of course, pledged $100 million, but then perhaps another 100 in terms of other logistics. Of course, this is a voluntary kind of engagement that we're going to have there. And so as Kenya, perhaps one thing we may want to do is to ensure that we appeal to more partners, to make solid commitment with regard to that mission. Because $100 million maybe to a Kenyan might sound like a lot of money, but if you're going to deploy a team, which is going to be, I think, upwards of 3,000, not from Kenya, but from other players, it's not going to be sufficient. And some of the critical things for those people who are familiar with Haiti is this is a country that lacks the basic infrastructure to function as a country. And the earthquake in 2009 did not exactly help. It wiped out everything, including what is equivalent to State House in Kenya was actually destroyed in the rubble. There was nothing that was left standing. 300,000 Haitians died in one day, so you can imagine. So it's a country that lacks the basic things, and as we're going to find out, that these efforts we may have also to appeal to the rest of the world, especially, countries in the West, as well as elsewhere. I'm saying countries in the West, like North America, has an immediate interest. They've been missions before. This is not the first time a country is actually trying to intervene to help, Haiti bring order. 1915, the US was there. In the 70s, in the 1990s, Brazil has been there, and things have not exactly worked. But a number of times there hasn't been a genuine interest to actually, I think, make it work the way it's supposed to work. So one area that I mentioned with regard to the unique circumstances, right now it's suffering from extreme constitutional and political legitimacy in that country. The terms of many members of parliament have pretty much, expired. The current acting president is technically the prime minister when the president was assassinated 2 years ago, you see. So that process of lack of legitimacy has contributed some of the quagmire we are seeing. But secondly, lack of basic services, which is going to require that this commitment, that is the reason I was saying 100 million is a drop in the ocean, that the teams and the mission that's going to be there may have to be involved in putting in place clinics, some hospitals, some basic infrastructure to actually give people some refuge, and that's going to require money. You see, I'm not so much worried about the fact that Kenya is deploying, because Kenya, peace diplomacy is part of the pillars of our own foreign policy. We've been known with that, and we allowed it throughout the world, and it advances our national interests. So I'm not going to shy away from having Kenya engage outside there to help other people stabilize. But I think what we're going to also need is to ensure that since this is a voluntary, therefore it's not obligating anybody to donate, contribute money, that we have solid commitments from the rest of the world, so we can ensure that our men and women in uniform, they actually accomplish the mission to which they've been sent to.
Right. It's at 8 o'clock on the nose. We take another short break. Even as we continue with the discussion, just a bit to listen from what the president had to say yesterday, and we wind up on Haiti. Just news coming in as well is that Biden has hailed President Ruto for successful Africa climate pledges, more U.S. investment for sustainable growth, job creation. And also earlier on, he phoned President Ruto to thank him for offering Kenya as a lead nation in Haiti mission, and welcomes UN Security Council endorsement. Those are the letters that we're getting so far, and we circle back and just listen to what he had to say yesterday. Moving forward, very optimistic and sanguine about this particular mission, and then